This is the CNC Router Tips Podcast, episode 43.
You need to find your audience. Prove to yourself that you can engage with them before you worry about what your product's going to be.
This is the CNC Router Tips Podcast, a show which answers one question from you, the listener, about CNC router tables, CNC software, hardware, web hosting, and business. I'll help you get started in your CNC hobby or business and help you cut through the confusion.
Today's episode is sponsored by TheMakersGuide.com. The Maker's Guide. Useful tools for makers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the CNC Router Tips Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Griggs, and I'd like to welcome you to this episode. Today's episode is going to be a pleasure to participate in for me because I'm talking to someone who I enjoy talking with, frankly. I've met him through his activities online and in various CNC groups and on YouTube and other places around the web. And, you know, it's my pleasure to welcome Bob Warfield to the CNC Router Tips Podcast.
Hey, Bill, thanks very much for having me on. It's a pleasure talking with you.
Oh, you're welcome, Bob, and thank you for agreeing to talk with me. So, now you're kind of a fixture in the CNC community. How did it all begin? I mean, what were you doing before CNC?
You know, it's funny. I have always been what's come to be called a maker. I started out years and years and years ago building my own ham radio gear and grinding telescopes for mirrors and those kind of things. And, I used to pore over the old Unimat, that little tiny lathe catalog back in the day when I was in high school, and always wanted to be a machinist. And it was some years into my professional career as a software developer before I had an opportunity to do it. And I got started on it, and believe it or not, it was largely to make car parts. I wanted to make parts for a hot rod. And I never built the hot rod, but I made all kinds of parts for CNC and just really loved it.
The reason I'm laughing is because I had a similar experience with model airplanes. You know, I wanted to make model airplane parts, and, I haven't made one yet, but I'm loving the CNC.
I know just how that goes, Bill. Trust me, I know just how that goes. I've made one part for a car, and I was glad to be able to do it. It was a little part for I have a Cobra 427 kit car that's loads of fun, and it's just dead simple, and I needed to make a little part to make the clutch work. And but that's been it. I had such grand dreams, and it just never happened.
Well, it's still early, so, we'll get to it eventually. But it's funny. I found that the CNC, started out to support my hobby, and then it ended up becoming my hobby, and it's pretty interesting to see that you had a similar experience.
It's so engrossing. I mean, it's miles and miles wide, and it's miles and miles deep. I mean, if you're like me and you just enjoy learning things, there's just so many avenues to dive into and learn interesting things. And then on top of all that, I could just watch the darn things for hours. I don't know what it is about it, but watching a robot make a part, which is essentially what they do, is just captivating for me. Yeah,
it is. It's been years since my first CNC machine, and yet I still stand there and watch the machine going back and forth, and there's something mesmerizing about it.
There is, and there's also just something about a fully CNC machined part in all of its shiny glory. I mean, there's just nothing else like it. You can tell at a glance, when you're holding that precision machine part, that it's levels above the normal cast parts you're used to seeing as a consumer. It's something really special. And we CNCers, we talked about being into cars. We laugh when when they talk about, using terms like billet. We know that's not really right, but all the hot rodders and the motorcycle enthusiasts really mean by that is that special look that we CNCers all know of a precision machine part that's just so neat.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you were a software developer by trade. How did that come about? What were you? Did you go to college for that, or?
I did. So again, been a maker for a long time. I built my first microcomputer back in the days of the Altair 8800s. I had a 6502 machine from this weird company called Ohio Scientific.
I remember that.
And you remember those guys?
Oh, yeah.
And then after that, I had a trash 80 color computer. And by then I was in college and I was just hooked on it. And I went to school to study computer science. I got my bachelor's. I went on into graduate school and I basically did all of the coursework for a PhD, but I didn't write a thesis. I discovered I didn't really have much interest in doing that. And instead, I wrote a business plan for a startup company, and I founded my first company right out of college, and I've been kind of starting software companies ever since.
The entrepreneurial spirit that it takes to write a business plan and get started is something that fascinates me. So what was your driving force? What was that first company about?
Well, I don't know. This kind of all fits together somehow because if you wanted to kind of step back from everything I do, all of my interests in the companies and everything, they all involve making or creating something. And that really is kind of the meta level description of what turns me on. So just the idea of creating a company from nothing was very exciting. And what I got interested in, for whatever reason, was building a better spreadsheet. And that company was called Surpass Software. And ultimately, it was acquired by Borland back in the day and became a spreadsheet that a lot of people still remember called Quattro Pro.
Mm-hmm. I use Quattro Pro at work.
Yeah. So, and then ironically, here I am in CNC doing calculations all over again. But, it's not my first rodeo when it comes to calculating things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Borland also had a C program, as I recall, and a few other things. Borland was not a small company.
Not at all. We had, of course, Turbo C. We had Turbo Pascal, which went on to be Delphi. We had Paradox. We had DBase. We had a lot of products, and I was with the company for not quite 6 years. And when I left, it was a $500 million a year company, and I rose up through the ranks after my company was acquired and wound up being the vice president of engineering. Gosh, we had something like 300 people working for me, software developers, and it was one of the top software companies of its day. It was a lot of fun, and I still miss it sometimes.
So you're managing all these programmers, and at the end of the day, you needed to kick back and relax and do some things. And for you, that was making auto things, or
it was playing with cars. Really, I was a gearhead, and I'll tell you kind of a funny story. Just before we shipped Quattro Pro, I showed up at the building. And I unloaded this really crazy looking, lots of chrome, twin turbocharged, fuel injected motor, and we pushed that motor on a furniture dolly through the building, and it was like the Pied Piper. People would see it and they would just fall in line behind us to see where the heck were we going with this crazy motor, and we took it to my office and put it there on the floor. And everybody said, "Bob, what in the world are you doing with that thing?" And it was a project I'd been working on for some time to build this twin turbocharged motor to go in a Pantera that I was restoring. And I realized I didn't have time to finish Quattro Pro on schedule and get this car done. So that was going to be my motivation. I would have to sit there and look at that motor and just know I wasn't going to get to play with that car until I got that darn software product shipped, and that's what we did.
Talking about your family and, what was going on in your life at this point with Borland.
Well, lots and lots of hours. I mean, a company like that, you are working a lot of hours, 7 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day, and something has to give. And so I had to put the toys and the hobbies on hold and focus on the job and the family.
What kind of time period were we talking from this point? I mean, were you put away your hobbies for how long? How long were you, did this period of your life last?
It was about 18 months. It was a pretty long time, and there was a lot of excitement during that time too. The big the Loma Prieta earthquake hit, and that delayed us for a good month on our shipping, and so it was a very busy time.
What was your first intro into machining?
It was a long, long time ago. Believe it or not, I was in the third grade. And I wanted to build this telescope mount out of pipe fittings. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to make a shaft out of a pipe and put it through some pillow block bearings. And, I was in the third grade. I didn't know how to do that. And my dad says, well, you need a machinist. And it turns out he had a friend who was a machinist. And this guy's name, oddly enough, was Charlie Brown. And so we went to Charlie Brown's, to a third grade mind, it looked like a giant factory. It could have been a tiny little job shop. But we went to his place of work after the place had shut down at night and everybody had gone home except Charlie Brown. And it was me and my dad and Charlie Brown. And he had this big giant machine lathe. And again, this is to third grade eyes. And he put that pipe in there and he told me everything he was doing. And the thing I really remember the most is he was putting cutting oil on the pipe, and it was smoking like crazy. And I just thought, wow, cutting metal, gets so hot it makes this oil smoke, and you have to have the oil to do it. But it was fascinating. And when he was done, and it didn't take him very long, the shaft just fit perfectly in the bearings, and I got what I needed for my project, and I will never forget that night, and it was something magical about it. And I always wanted to be able to do what Charlie Brown had done.
That's awesome. Did you ever get the chance to work with Charlie Brown? Him as a mentor? Or?
I didn't. I mean, I was in the third grade. We moved away. This was in Denver, Colorado, not long after that. Mm-hmm. And so I never knew what really happened to Charlie Brown. My experiences with machining after that were just about entirely self-taught with, Asian machines, Asian imported cheap manual machine tools. First, I had a small lathe, and then I picked up an RF-45 mill.
Okay. The RF-45, was that the round column?
No, that was about as big of a square column mill as you would see outside a Bridgeport style knee mill. Mm-hmm. And the one I had was made by a company called Industrial Hobbies, and it was not a bad little mill. And I actually wound up converting it to CNC at the behest of a sort of a long distance pen pal and mentor that I had, who I'm good friends with to this day. He's a machinist that's out of Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. And he just kept after me. He kept saying, look, Bob, you're finding it's hard to finish your projects. It's taking so long. You need to focus entirely on getting your CNC conversion done. He said, because your productivity will just go up so much at that point you wouldn't even believe it. And he was completely right. It was so worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what time frame was this? What year, roughly?
Oh, geez. Back in the early 90s, maybe the late 80s, but I think more the early 90s that I did the CNC conversion.
That's at least 10 years, probably close to 10 years before I got into CNC. So that's It's pretty early stuff. What type of equipment did you end up using? You were using steppers or servos, or what did you do?
I went with servos. I'm a hot rodder. I've always got to find some way to do something a little bit better. And, we had ball screws and, servos with timing belts on them and did that whole conversion. I built my own controller for it using Gecko drives and some boards from a company called CNC for PC. Very nice company.
Mm-hmm. They're out of Florida.
Yeah. And I think the guy that runs its name is Arturo. Really nice guy. Answered a lot of stupid questions I had.
Yeah, Arturo Duncan. Yep.
Got the whole thing working.
Yeah, it's a good company. I've ordered some stuff from him. I hadn't realized that he was in it that long. That's impressive. So when I first was exposed to CNC, it was probably the first set of plans that I was able to get my hands on were from a guy named John Kleinbauer. And he used to have a website that dealt with building your own CNC stuff out of equipment you could buy at the hardware store.
Cool.
Yeah, so it was quite a bit different because back in the day there was very little information out about CNC. And, there was lots of information about machining. There were some very great magazines, that were publishing stuff every month with whole projects that would have measured drawings and everything. And you could follow along with those. But as far as any information about the CNC, that was pretty scarce. So I'm impressed that you were able to find that stuff then.
Well, I think my ham radio and electronics background helped me a lot because there was definitely some troubleshooting involved with the control. The mechanicals were pretty straightforward, but the control took me a little bit of fooling around to get that to work.
What was the project that was driving this? What were you trying to build with this RF45 at that time?
I was happy just to be playing with the machine tools. For years and years and years, people would ask me, they'd see this garage full of tools, and they'd go, well, what are you making with all this? And I go, well, I started out to make hot rod parts, just like I told you. And they'd go, well, show me your hot rod parts. And I'd say, well, I haven't made any. And they go, well, what are you making? I'm making tools. Well, what are you going to make with the tools? Well, probably more tools. I have a long list of things I want to do here. And that didn't make sense to anybody but other machinists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of hard to believe, but that seems to be a trend. There's the guys who like to make things, who like to make signs and artistic things, and then there's the guys who like to make other tools. And I'm kind of leaning that way more than liking to make the signs and the decorative things. I can do that stuff. It's just I really enjoy the engineering that goes into designing a well-made tool. And executing it. And I know that probably is the case with you as well.
I think you're spot on about the whole engineering thing. And there's a tendency among us engineers to over-engineer. And it's so easy to do that with tools, especially, if you've got a whole CNC machine to yourself as a project. I mean, what a rich milieu that is to play around in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just amazed at how quickly the technology is starting to fire up now compared to, the slow years between, when I got started and when you got started, my goodness. But it seems to be accelerating. Things like these ClearPath servos, motors that are coming out, just plug in a cable and go kind of thing. There's all sorts of technology coming out. But the one thing that people keep running into roadblocks with is how to actually run the machines. And you seem to be right in the thick of things and helping people solve that issue.
It's true. You can get one running and then you got to figure out how to run it well. And, somebody was asking me about this the other day, and I said, well, you know what? CNC is great because it doesn't require muscle memory. So it's not like learning to play a guitar or learning to play golf, where you have to go through this really laborious and frustrating process of training your muscle memory. And so it's a little more cerebral art, and it's art that can be perfected, but at the same time that creates other challenges, right? I mean, if you're going to perfect that art, you got to understand the science behind it. And that's kind of what CNC Cookbook has been all about, is trying to make that simple for people to get really high-class solutions to their problems without trying very hard.
Mm-hmm. For those of our listeners who aren't familiar with CNC Cookbook, CNC Cookbook is a website, a blog, software, and periodic videos and tutorials that teach people how to do this machining thing better, easier, faster, more reliably. And
exactly,
this is what Bob's baby is. How did this all come about? Tell me about the thought. I'd like to really hear about the spark. What was it that made you decide to start creating CNC Cookbook?
It was kind of initially just a hobby. I like to write about what I'm doing, and I like to solicit feedback from others. I'm very extroverted in that respect. I get a lot of energy from talking to others about their ideas and, bouncing the ideas all around. So it started that way, but ultimately it turned into a business almost on a dare. I've been a serial entrepreneur all my life. I've started companies. CNC Cookbook is actually my 8th startup company that I've been involved with, and it's by far the most fun. And really the dare was, I could sort of see it out there that in the digital age, with the internet, with the online automation tools, the cloud, all of those things, that it might be possible to create a one-man software business that was actually interesting and that could reach a lot of people. And I thought about, well, what market should I be in? And I thought, well, it better be something I love, something I'm passionate about, because it's going to be a lot of hard work, and it's not going to make a dime for a long time, and I'm going to have a way to sustain myself. So I seized on CNC. I loved it. I had this kind of hobby blog going that I had named CNC Cookbook. And I said, well, how do I turn this into a business? And I set about doing that. And, as they say, the rest is history. Today, over the course of the last year, we probably had 3 million visitors come to the website, which is huge. Mm-hmm. And, that's all just been because I put out thousands of how-to articles on this site, and I've used the techniques of digital marketing to make that work and to attract search engine traffic from Google. And it's been great. It's been fantastic. I wish I had thought to do it 15 years earlier.
So let's back up a second and talk about the CNC Cookbook blog when it first came out.
Okay.
Sure. So what was that like? What made you decide to become a blogger?
Again, I'm an extrovert. I like to throw ideas out there and get feedback. So I was basically writing and documenting my projects and, telling my machining friends about them, asking questions over on CNC Zone, directing people to come to the blog to see what I was asking questions about. And that's how it got started. Mm-hmm. And it was really no big thing initially.
Yeah, I also got started doing stuff on CNC Zone and RC groups and a few other places, just posting in forums and mainly trying to document what I was finding, just because I knew at some point I'd want to look back at it, because you forget how to do something if you don't do it often enough. And some of these CNC tasks, the electronics or the wiring are so complex that it's difficult to remember every step that you did. But if you take a picture of it and write about it, you got a better shot at it.
Boy, Bill, don't I know it. Exactly where I'm coming from. Documenting it. The other weird thing for me is I find if I write about something, it helps me to think about it, and it helps me to really flesh it out more fully than I would if I don't. So I've really grown to love the practice of writing about these things.
Okay. So how many years have you been doing the blog?
Wow. I don't know exactly, somewhere between 10 and 15. It's been going on for a while.
Yeah, you got me. 10 or 15 years. Okay. So I'm also in the process of converting some of my efforts into a business. You know, as you know, I make the Maker's Guide Triple Edge Finder, which is a product to help people find the X, Y, and Z locations on a CNC router table. And so the transition from Blogger for me in my initial site, makermasters.com, over to themakersguide.com. Ooh, you catch those two plugs? Yeah, smooth, huh?
I did. They were smoothly done, though. I really liked it.
Oh, yeah. They'll never notice. Anyway, the transition for me over into those things, it was kind of an evolutionary step, and I never intentionally started blogging with the business mind because my only real entrepreneurial experience prior to that was in running a model airplane business. And so this was a new thing. This was a whole new area of thinking. With your experience with Borland and seeing how they were marketing things, I would have thought that it would have been a natural step for you to go into online marketing from there. Was that the case, or was it just kind of sprung on you?
Boy, it took me a long time before I was comfortable thinking of myself as a marketer. Particularly as an engineer and a software developer, I learned a lot of great things at Borland. I had a chance to work with a guy who's been very influential for me, whose name is Mark Randolph, and he's the guy that came up with the idea for and founded Netflix, of all things. And he was the first guy, and I met him at Borland, that showed me how to think about marketing as an analytical and scientific exercise. Before that time, marketers to me were sort of more akin to fashion designers or something than engineers, right? I mean, they would look at a page and go, yeah, that's a great page, or no, it's not, but they never could explain why. There were never any numbers that really measured their results. It seemed all to have to do with how pretty and stylish things were. And this guy, Mark Randolph, he didn't think about things at all that way. And it really hooked me in. And so I got interested in that. And over time, the nature of marketing changed too. More and more things went online to the internet, where it's actually far easier to manage your results and be analytical about it. And so when I got to this point that I referred to as a dare to myself of could I turn this hobby blog into a business, I knew that's how I wanted to do it, analytically and scientifically. I didn't quite know how to do that, though. Mm-hmm. And so, again, I like to learn new things, and I went to school on that. And I just got really interested in reading everything there was that I could get my hands on about digital marketing. And I kind of gradually started teasing some ideas out of it that today people refer to with the buzzword of growth hacking. Mm-hmm. I mean, you hear a lot about growth hacking. And I sort of discovered those laws of marketing physics, if you will, on my own with this crazy blog dare startup idea, where the first thing that I did was to hook up a bunch of analytics to it using Google Analytics and start doing very carefully controlled experiments to see what worked and what didn't.
Okay. Now, you were doing this on your own, bootstrapping it, or did you have a budget when you started?
Totally bootstrapping it. the venture capital world had changed. I've raised a lot of venture capital in my career. And every single venture capital company that I participated in, several of them were acquired, one of them IPO'd, it would not be possible to found those companies today because of how that world has changed. You have to be a bootstrapper in order to raise venture capital because they're going to want you to build a product, find 10 or 12 key reference customers they can talk to who love your product, and demonstrate a significant amount of growth momentum before they'll put any money into you.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that I had to figure out how to be a bootstrapper, even if my plan was to raise venture capital down the road. And I'll tell you right now, I've had enough experience with venture capital that I now steer most entrepreneurs away from it if I can and tell them, look, unless you really need to be Mark Zuckerberg and make that many millions of dollars, it's easier, it's less risky, and it's a lot more fun to do it as a bootstrap than to raise venture capital. And you're going to have to be able to do a lot as a bootstrap anyway, even if you did raise venture. Yeah.
And, it's funny because the whole dynamic of this bootstrapping has even changed now because you throw in things like crowdfunding, through Kickstarter, through many of the other places that allow someone to take an idea, develop a prototype very rapidly, and then see who bites, see who wants that enough to put their money into it. Totally different set of dynamics now. So it doesn't require...
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. It doesn't require such a big
I think it's
investment.
really cool.
Yeah. So with that sort of thing going on, you decided to build up your company, CNC Cookbooks, and turn it from a blog into a business. And what was the first challenge you ran into?
I had to come up with a product. Right? I firmly believe in a couple of things that I will tell anybody that wants to start out creating a business. One, bootstrap it. Two, don't quit your day job until you're making enough money to pay the bills. And three, get yourself an audience before you even try to come up with the product. We're product people, Bill, right? I mean, you and I like to make things.
Yep.
And it's so fun to think of product possibilities, but it's cart before the horse. You need to find your audience, prove to yourself that you can engage with them before you worry about what your product's going to be. Now, for my case, I was lucky. That was not my first challenge. I had proven I had this audience at the hobby stage and that I could engage with them. Mm-hmm. And I had played enough with the analytics and the different tests and experiments, really more from a learning standpoint than because I had decided to make it a business, to know I had that under control. So my first challenge was to figure out a product.
Okay. And what did you look at that you didn't do? What products did you think about that you didn't do?
Today's episode is sponsored by The Maker's Guide, creator of the Triple Edge Finder. Get the edge you need, save time and frustration on your CNC project, and make setup a snap. Save time and material. Set up your workpiece on your CNC router table faster than ever. Accurately set your Z-axis height first time, every time. Automatically locate the corner or edge of a workpiece. Reset your starting point in the middle of a program. Quality crafted right here in the USA on US-made CNC machines. Get the edge you need today. Go to www.themakersguide.com/edge. The Maker's Guide. Useful tools for makers.
What did you look at that you didn't do? What products did you think about that you didn't do?
CAD-CAM program. That's the big sexy thing, right, in the CNC world, right? And we need another one like we need a hole in the head, right? There's so many of them. Autodesk will give you a fabulous one for free.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God I didn't go down that path, only to later find out Autodesk was going to give away Fusion 360.
Oh, yeah.
That would have been no fun to compete against. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do CAD CAM, and I knew that it was, number one, it was very hard. The bar was going to be very high. And I wanted to build a best of kind of product. That's all I've ever built. That's what I'm comfortable with. I didn't want to just build a pretty good thing that was cheaper than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so much as I wanted that sexy, let's build a CAD CAM package, I steered myself away from it because looking out at a lot of different software markets, I had always kind of admired the utility market. It's not sexy, right? It's not like spreadsheets and word processors and CAD CAM programs. But yet there's a lot of money to be made in utilities. They're very important to people, and there's a lot less competition around utilities. So after thinking about it long and hard and sort of, prying my fingers loose from the idea of a CAD CAM program, which my heart really thought it would be fun to do it, I settled on, well, let's build some utility software, and came up with the idea for GWizard Calculator.
Okay. Now, GWizard Calculator answers one of the, well, it does. It's like a Swiss Army knife of CNC apps, but it does answer one of the questions that I see a lot inside of the CNC Router Tips group and on, Joe CNC Forum and CNC Zone and everywhere. Everybody's always asking about feeds and speeds. With this bit, what do I use? With this bit, what do I use? And GWizard Calculator answers those questions. So tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. I actually had an early version of GWizard Calculator in hand before I started thinking about CNC Cookbook as a business. And the reason was I started out, as so many do, and so many are still in this position, with a spreadsheet. Right? I mean, I knew a thing or two about spreadsheets, having built Quattro Pro, and I put together this insanely complex spreadsheet for my feeds and speeds. And, with my love of learning things, I would just go through tooling catalog after tooling catalog, and they all have a technical info section where they tell you all kinds of cool stuff. And, here's how you calculate adjustments for chip thinning. Here's lead angles. And here's how you figure out the effective diameter of a ball nose cutter, and just on and on and on and on. And I was plugging that stuff into an Excel spreadsheet, and it was kind of getting more and more unwieldy. And I started having to do calculations that you just can't do in spreadsheets. I mean, they're just not really able to solve multivariable problems very well. They're built for change one variable, recalculate all the formulas, and here's the answer. And the problem is, well, I mean, if you look at what GWizard Calculator does, it's looking at 60 different variables. And in a lot of cases, it's that, they interact with each other in weird ways. And it's trying to come up with kind of the best mix of several different answers to satisfy all those variables and all that math. So I built an early version of it and started playing with that as a way to get around the limitations of spreadsheets. And once I had made up my mind to build a utility, and having had all of this experience on places like CNC Zone and Practical Machinist and Home Shop Machines, so all the boards I used to just, back when I had more time, I was on them constantly. As you say, these questions were coming up over and over again. I could help people with these questions. And so that's what I set out to build.
What version are you on now of the GWizard Calculator? I'm sorry.
3.67 or something here. I'll bring it up real quick and just see on my screen. 3.65 is the currently released version.
Okay. And this program has been available to the public for, 5 years?
It's longer than that. I think I launched it in 2010, and I think I had about a year-long beta test, too.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it's been around for a while.
So it's been through quite a few iterations, and I had seen it talked about in CNC Zone for years, and I hadn't tried it, but many people kept saying, oh, well, I was checking out this calculation in GWizard, and, here's the speeds and feeds, and they'd talk about the chip loads and, many other things that really was just Greek to me at the time, but which I came to find out were important things. And when I finally did try it, just a little over almost a year ago was the first time I actually plugged it in and started using it. I was very happy with the results I was getting, although they weren't exact for the situation that I was in. And you're very good with customer service, by the way.
Good.
I reached out to you, and you said, well, the reason you're not getting the results that you are expecting is because you're using a generic setup. You need to customize this a little bit to fit the actual machine that you have. And the light went off. And from that moment on, once I had, taken the time, and it wasn't, maybe 10 or 15 minutes of just tweaking this and moving that, and bang, now I'm getting spot on results. And everything was like, woohoo, chips, I'm making chips,
Nice.
So it's one of those programs that has so much depth. I mean, where to start? I mean, I used it for a couple. Okay, you can use this as a testimonial, Bob.
Great.
But I used it for about 3 weeks before I ever looked at the other tabs that you had there that did other things like pocket, or not pockets, but if I wanted to do a bolt hole pattern, there was a wizard for that. If I wanted to do some chamfering, there was something that covered that. If I wanted to do a pocket or a circular interpolation thing, that there was something in there for that. It was just on another tab. Sweet.
It was all the stuff I kept having to, interrupt my session with the CAM software to go figure out somewhere else. So I just kept adding it.
Mm-hmm. So I don't mean this for this to be, a big GWizard calculator commercial, but I think it's a really great program that folks should be aware of, at least. And but I do want to talk about a couple of the features and have you maybe expound on them. The one thing that I found in the program that was really useful was your tortoise and hare slider. So explain what that is and what it does and how
the tortoise hare slider. So, I got to be honest. I was motivated by the little symbol of a tortoise and a hare that appears on old Bridgeport mills. And for them, it just changes the spindle speed with these variable pitch pulleys. But for me, I wanted to give people the ability to fine-tune their feeds and speeds, because something I learned pretty early on, and by the way, this is something Greg Jackson from Tormach really encouraged me on too, was people don't want to just get an answer. They want to kind of personalize the answer to their situation. So the tortoise hare lets you do that. It lets you make the trade-offs between the hare, who's very aggressive and very fast and makes a lot of chips as quickly as he can, and the tortoise, who's all about, golly, I want my tools to last as long as possible, and maybe my machine is a little bit lighter weight hobby machine, and I want really fine surface finish. And it kind of gives you that nice ability to continuously make that trade-off.
Yeah, it really does change the results and the numbers that you're getting. to input into your program, and it does. The tortoise settings are really great for getting fantastic surface finish on your parts, and something that you wouldn't get from the hair settings. But that it's just a little thing like that. Customizing your results based on how quickly you want to cut something. That made it for me. You also recently did some calculations that were added just to suit the CNC market, or the CNC router market. Is that correct?
Oh, I did. And it's a different market. And I kept hearing from them that it's a different market, and they had different needs. And there were a lot of different things they wanted me to address to help them out. I mean, not the least of which was GWizard has a large material database, but until fairly recently, it didn't have very many varieties of wood. Mm-hmm. And, the CNC router gang, as you well know, Bill, wood is different. Yes. There are a lot of different species of it, and I really needed to figure out how to deal with that. And so we literally added a couple of hundred different species of wood. We delved into the Janka hardness scale and got that fine-tuning available. Another problem I had, and I get all of my best ideas, I have to be brutally honest about this, they're not my ideas. They come from my customers. Mm-hmm. And at this point, a ridiculous number of people have used this product. It's up to, I think, 70,000 people have tried this product. And I try to keep my lines of communication open every possible way. I read every email I get. There's a board where you can suggest features and vote on them. You can file customer tickets with me. I send you emails and solicit your feedback. And this one customer was telling me that, he just didn't think GWizard could help him because he was on a CNC router with a vacuum table, and he was making small parts. And his feeds and speeds were already too aggressive, and those parts were popping off the vacuum table. Mm-hmm. Well, man, a light bulb went off on my head, and I said, look, I can calculate how to limit your cutting force so your part won't pop off based on the amount of vacuum you have, the surface area of the part, and all that good stuff. And so I created this little, what I call a mini calc, a vacuum mini calc, and it'll literally limit the feeds and speeds to prevent your parts from popping off your vacuum table. And boy, this guy couldn't believe it when I wrote him back and said, hey, not only did I build this, but I want to give you a complimentary copy for having given me this great idea, and please try it out and tell me what you think. And he loved it. It was great. So we built in a lot of different things for each of our different audiences.
Mm-hmm. Now, the main difference between the CNC router and a milling machine, other than the material that we tend to use, is the level of stiffness of the machine, the rigidity that is there. Obviously, milling machines are built like tanks, whereas with the current brand of CNC routers or current blend that are out there, we go from some very flimsy stuff that is made with very thin extrusions to the Onsrud style industrial machine or whatever. How do you deal with that?
So that's another interesting feature that's not just for routers, but it's also for people with very small, lightweight CNC mills like the little Siegs, or a TEG or a Sherline. What I did was I made a study of large industrial class CNC machines. What was their work envelope? How much did they weigh? What were the rigidity implications of that? And I created a mathematical model that would derive the implied rigidity of a lightweight machine, say something tiny like a little Shape Oko, based on that. Because, if you have a big work envelope, if you have a lot of range of travels, but your machine doesn't weigh anything, it's probably not very rigid. Mm-hmm. And we have to account for that. And so I made it really easy for you to tell me, well, here's my travels. Here's what my machine weighs. Now go and adjust the spindle horsepower maximum limit so that I don't put so much cutting force into the machine that bends too much. And, right away I had customers with tiny little machines telling me this was transformative for them in terms of improving the quality of the finishes they were getting and reducing, the number of tools they were breaking. They loved it. And it's been great for the CNC router world as well.
Mm-hmm. So I know when you discussed with me earlier the direction that you were taking with this, but by adding the router stuff to the machine, that you do very quick, very fast updates. You push those updates out as part of your service. You're not charging people to upgrade to add that functionality, are you?
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't believe in charging for upgrades. I just think that ought to come to you. Wouldn't it be so cool if actual physical products could do that? If, for example, your car just got faster sitting in the driveway. That would be so cool. And we can do that with software, and it doesn't cost us anything. So why not? Why not make customers happier by doing that?
Mm-hmm. Now, what model of revenue is this? A software as a service, or is this a one-time payment type program, or how do you offer this to your users?
You have both choices. You can buy it as a subscription. You can buy 1 year, 3 years, and keep renewing, or you can do a one-time lifetime purchase. And I think that's important too, depending on what you're trying to optimize. It's cheaper to buy the lifetime, but it's more cash up front. So it's kind of like, do I buy the car or do I lease it? Mm-hmm. The other thing I do is I make it cheap for hobbyists versus professionals. I had a guy tell me one time, he says, Bob, I saved $25,000 with your product just during the trial period. Now, obviously, that guy was a professional. Mm-hmm. He was making big runs of parts. And my wife heard the story, and she says, Bob, you're not charging enough for this software. I said, it's okay. It's okay, honey. I'm charging the right amount for it. But, hobbyists have small machines. So for each year that you subscribe, you get guaranteed for life 1 horsepower. Mm-hmm. Right? So if you've got say let's take a Tormach 1100 mil. Nice mill, right, Bill? Mm-hmm.
I hope so.
I hope so. He hasn't got his yet, but he's going to love it. Anyway, shameless plug for the Tormach guys. They're nice people. It's got a 1.5 horsepower motor, and Tormach sells a version of GWizard for $79. That'll give you for life a 1.5 horsepower. Right? That's reasonable for a hobbyist to pay $79. Mm-hmm. If it saves you like 2 end mills, it paid for itself.
Oh, yeah.
Right? But
Definitely.
A pro, they ought to be paying a little bit more. And so their 20 horsepower machine, they're not going to get there with just one year subscription. So it sounds kind of complicated, but it's designed to try to make everybody happy. And by and large, it works pretty good at that.
Well, you let the cat out of the bag, Bob, on my Tormach.
I did. I'm sorry, but I just am so excited for you. You're going to love that thing. It is such fun. I was playing with mine today for most of the day.
I'm very excited. In fact, I just found out that it's going through this weekend. So yeah, everything is in place. I have a buyer for my Grizzly mill that I converted to CNC. Very happy, a good friend of mine. Said, yeah, I'll take it.
Yep.
And, so now I have the room to get the nice. Tormach PCNC 1100. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a new experience, being able to do a little bit of production work in in-house. I can't wait to see what I develop. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I think you'll be able to turn out your edge finders even faster and come up with a bunch of new ideas besides.
Yeah, I've got a couple that I would really like to pursue that weren't practical for me to do before. And so I'm really excited about this. I'm still going to be doing the CNC router stuff. This is just another tool in the quiver.
It's funny about the CNC router stuff. I have a real hankering to get a 4x8 foot table CNC router of reasonable quality. I think I would have a lot of fun with it, and I just think it'd be a really useful thing to have around the shop.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah, it's one of those things. If you've got the room, I would do it. I wouldn't think about it.
Well, we're not quite up to speed on the room. I would have to move some heaven and earth, and the boss, the chief female officer in my business, my wife, she's not up for that right now. It's a little too soon since I got my my Tormach, so we'll have to wait on that.
When did you receive yours?
Oh, let's see. I got the slant bed lathe first, and then I got a mill. I think it's been almost 2 years since I got the mill.
Oh.
It's been a little while, and I've had a lot of fun with it. And I'll tell you the scariest thing about the whole mill, I am just such a wimp when it comes to rigging heavy machinery. I don't know why, but it just scares the heck out of me moving that stuff around. And so I had to hire a guy with a forklift to get the thing in and set up. And it was no problem in the end of the day, but I'm a worrywart about that stuff.
Oh, I'm right there with you. I've been going back and forth on that all week, trying to decide whether an engine hoist was enough or to get a guy to come out with a forklift. And I'm sure that the guys in the Tormach users group on Facebook are tired of me by now, because I'm asking all the questions like, how much does it weigh? How far away from the wall should I put it?
Yep.
And
that's all important stuff you got to get nailed.
Oh, yeah.
But boy, once it's in and it's all working, that is a fun toy.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's very similar to what I went, and probably why I'm asking so many questions now, because when I decided to build my Joe's CNC 4x4 router table, I just knew I wanted one. I had no idea realistically where it was going to fit and, just how much space I needed until I was partway into the build and realized, honey, your car's in the driveway now.
I got to say, for people that don't know about those Joe's machines, you'd look at one and you'd go, man, it's made out of wood. How good can it be? And then you see some of the stuff that comes off of them and you just go, I got to get me a CNC machine. Mm-hmm. They are so fantastic.
Well, you're referring to the early ones. Now, the ones that we have are aluminum and steel now. So,
cool! I didn't know. I'm used to the MDF.
Yeah. So progress, really happened. I was originally set to build one of the wooden versions. I think that was the Joe's 2006 plans, but he came out with the new one at the time, and I decided to wait a few months. And I'm so glad I did, because it's a much bigger machine and much stronger. And, it was just fantastic. And no roller skate bearings on that.
So nice.
Yeah.
So nice.
Yeah. So, yeah. I highly recommend getting a CNC router table if you are able and willing. I don't know, Bob, I've had a wonderful time talking with you tonight and, sharing a little bit about what you've been up to and your program. Is there anything that you would like to discuss that we didn't cover?
Bill, I had a fine time myself, and, there's nothing critical that's going on here. We're just going to keep working with our products to make them easier for everybody. And as well to take care of some of the special needs for audiences like CNC router users. Mm-hmm. So going to keep up the good work, going to keep on publishing great articles, and I really do appreciate the chance to talk with you.
That's fantastic. Now, if people want to check out your products and your blog and everything, where do they go?
It's www.cnccookbook.com, and there's a blog choice, there's a products choice, and the other choice I want to tell everybody about is the cookbook choice, because I've got like 10 free tutorial courses there to help CNCers out. Everything from a free feeds and speeds course, a G-code programming course, to courses for beginners. So check that out too.
Fantastic. So that's CNCCookbook.com.
Exactly.
Okay. And if folks want to reach out to you directly, are you on social media?
We are. We have a Facebook page, CNC Cookbook, but really the best thing is just send me some email, bob@cnccookbook.com.
Okay. Thank you so much, Bob, for coming on the show, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if we have some questions, maybe we can sometime in the future maybe do something where we talk just about feeds and speeds and maybe walk folks through something.
Sure, that'd be a lot of fun. Anytime, Bill. I'm always have a good time talking with you.
I enjoyed it as well. So thanks again. You've been listening to the CNC Router Tips podcast, and our guest today was Bob Warfield of CNCCookbook.com. If you liked this episode, please send us some feedback. Give us a review, a rating or a review in iTunes, or send me a tweet at Bill Griggs is my Twitter handle. Or check us out in the Facebook groups, #CNC Router Tips. So I hope you enjoyed the show, and thank you very much for tuning in. I often mention many different types of software during the episodes, and hardware and cutters, and it can get a little confusing. So what I did was I put together a page on my website, cncroutertips.com/resources. And on that page, I list all sorts of resources there, from books to tools to software, all the things that I use that make my CNC experience better and easier. And I hope you'll check it out. So again, it's cncroutertips.com/resources. Now, if you'd like to have your question featured on the air, here's how. Need help? Ask me about your CNC router question on my podcast, the CNC Router Tips Podcast. I'll be glad to help, or try and get you the help you need. I want this podcast to be a fun and personal experience for everyone, and helpful. So let's keep it real and ask sensible questions. Please use common sense and show courtesy to everyone. That way everybody wins. Here are some guidelines to ensure that your question is qualified to be featured on the show. Please keep your questions under 1 minute in length. If it goes a little over that, that's fine, but don't ramble. If you have a website and URL, you're allowed to share it, but only once during the recording. Spammy or disrespectful or deeply private questions will not be considered for the podcast. If you need to ask more than one question, just make each question a separate voicemail. Thanks for listening in to another episode of the CNC Router Tips podcast. I hope you'll come back and join us again soon. I'm Bill Griggs. Thank you and have a great day.